talk about maybe becoming a little more love bomb resistant. So given that many narcissistic intimate relationships begin with love bombing, and then by the time we realize what we are in, it is almost too late, doesn't it make sense that if we can cut this off at the pass earlier in the process, that we may be in a better space to not get into them too far, and then it's easier to get out. It's easier to cut and run after a second date than it is after 12 months. Now, this is challenging for a few reasons, but most pointedly, because love bombing is not just one thing. It can show up lots of ways, including, let's talk about those. Grandiose love bombing, gifts, flowers, really cool, thoughtful early dates, extravagant gestures, taking a big trip as your third date, lots of what seems like generosity. They pick up the check at expensive dinners, etc. They may be attractive, sexy, up for anything fun, and again, that whole idea of a fairy tale. This actually is sort of the prototype of love bombing. Then there's obsessive love bombing. This can include some of the grandiose love bombing, but also be the constant sort of texting. Good morning, my queen. Good night, my baby. I can't stop thinking about you. That sort of stuff that's coming at you a lot. You feel someone is constantly thinking about you. The thing here is that there is little anxiety about how this person feels. As long as these obsessive texts are coming in, you're confident that this person is into you. Then there's controlling love bombing. Now this has some overlap with obsessive love bombing, but this also may include lots and lots of time together, and they may then also want or offer to do things like pick you up from work, or drive you to work, or drive you to school, or pick you up from school, or want to start spending every night together pretty early in the relationship, or it feels like they've kind of moved in after the third date. And they always want to know where you are. Hey babe, FaceTime me from where you are so I can see where you are. They're doing this because they don't trust you and they want to know where you are. They may try to convince you to spend less time with friends and family, like, aren't I enough? Don't you want to spend time with me? I thought you wanted a relationship, kind of nonsense. They may playfully express jealousy about other people. Say things like, I want you all to myself. You're so gorgeous. So yeah, I get a little anxious about those dudes you work with. That kind of stuff, dangerous. Pay attention to this kind of talk. Once again, any anxieties about this person being interested, or will they ever text me back, or is there going to be a second date? That anxiety is also gone because they are always there. Then there is what I call I see you love bombing. This form of love bombing is the person who notices everything about you. And it may even at times feel really encouraging. They may ask you lots of questions about yourself. This may actually be one of the trickiest forms of love bombing to see as love bombing because you do feel seen. But sprinkled into this may be little bits of shade, some anger, some passive-aggressive digs, a few bits of gaslighting. But early their play is lots of curiosity and even what feels like encouragement and excitement about what you do. They may say things like, I have never met anyone like you. You are so interesting. I can't believe someone hasn't said that to you sooner. And these can really feel like amazing things to hear, especially if you didn't hear them growing up. Then there's the I need you love bomber. This is the person who's a bit of a project. They need you. They're like a fixer-upper. You give them advice, support, resources. You loan them your car. You let them stay at your place. You introduce them to people you know in your business, and they're so appreciative initially. You buy into their narrative that life has never been fair to them, and you want to be the one to turn it all around for them. So you listen to their sad stories and you become their therapist, their life coach, their closet organizer, and their debt consolidator. And in return, they start to maybe even blossom a little. And you appreciate that. You may even pity this person a little bit. And if your nature is to be very empathic, you may find that you want to prove to this person that they are lovable, and your compassion and empathy may lead you to try to find the good in them, especially during the early days, because they do need you. Then there's the grown-up love bomber. This is the love bomber who is very responsible and moral and has all kinds of bank accounts and no debt, and they're saving up to buy a place, or they already did, and they don't spend money irresponsibly, and they do what feels, at least financially, like the right thing. This is how the self-righteous narcissist can love bomb you. But you might see these patterns also in a financially controlling malignant narcissist. But that part won't show up in the beginning. But somebody who does this sort of grown-up love bombing may be somebody who feels quite seductive, especially if they come on the heels of you having dated a string of overgrown adolescents. And this grown-up love bomber may not seem shady. Hell, someone like this may not even have social media, which can feel really refreshing, especially if you were in a relationship with someone who was shady and gross and inappropriate on social media. If you had fiscally irresponsible or selfish parents, the grown-up love bomber can also be appealing. Or if in past relationships, you always felt that you had to be the buzzkill grown-up, the grown-up love bomber holds a lot of appeal, especially if at this point you're thinking about longer-term commitment, marriage, house, kids, that kind of sequence. The adulty feel of this person and their sort of seeming fiscal responsibility can mean that you see a future here. The part about them tracking every cent of your spending has probably not happened yet, of course, and their little judgmental comments, those won't show up during the love bombing phase. Then there's the offset love bomber. And what is this, you may ask? This is the person who comes along and is completely different than your last relationship. And they get double points and double impact if your last relationship was toxic in a specific way. So if the last person you were with was a cheap ass who didn't pay for anything, and this offset love bomber does. The last person might have been someone who made fun of you or makes jokes at your expense. This might be more of an I see you love bomber. The last person you were in a relationship was controlling. This person may not be. Now, how does this happen? For example, you may have dropped enough hints about your past relationship that they see what you don't want. And some of it may be sheer luck. Bad luck, but sheer luck and timing. Because it may just turn out that their love bomb game is simply an offset to what you had in your prior relationship. For example, you may end a relationship with a dull, socially isolated person and then meet a fun-loving, free-spending, generous, extroverted, grandiose narcissist. Initially, that's going to feel like a breath of fresh air. So the offset love bomber isn't always just trying to get intel on you and then chameleon into what they think you want. Who they are may just be such a contrast to the past relationship that you are just so relieved that you go with it. And then they have love bombing qualities, but those are absolute offset to what the last one was. These different love bombers play to different people. Some people are turned off by these patterns, some others embrace them. So what can we learn from this and about this? That we're not all uniformly love bomb vulnerable, but all of us are more vulnerable to one or maybe two of these love bomb types compared to others. To become love bomb resistant, you not only need to know what love bombing and ideally what narcissism are, but you also need to do this second piece, which is really the key. You need to explore your own blind spots. I guess we could call them scotomas, right? A blind spot is literally where the retina meets the optic nerve. There are no rods and cones, so you can see no images there, right? But because we have two eyes, the one makes up for the other. And so here, how could we psychologically make up for a blind spot? Here's where the knowledge about narcissism and love bombing can couple with knowing about your so-called sort of psychological blind spots. You can already see the patterns, right? People with abandonment wounds are going to be more vulnerable to getting stuck with obsessive or controlling love bombers, because all that will they call, are they not going to call, that stuff's lifted. Folks who love a fairy tale, they might be putty in a grandiose narcissistic person's hands. Interestingly, narcissistic people, they themselves are also vulnerable to grandiose love bombing because they feel entitled to a fairy tale. That's how two narcissists can end up together. But we have to become aware of our core wounds and our core schemas, the stories we tell ourselves, about love, about relationships. We have to understand how we were shaped by our past relationships and what we may still be craving from childhood. For example, we may crave being seen, or a person who actually shows up as a grown-up and is responsible. Remember, it's not your fault that you were love bombed. And you can learn from your history to become more resistant to love bombing, to pay attention to the qualities that are more at risk of drawing you in. So much of this happens under our conscious radar because these are unprocessed issues that are being worked through in these relationships. Some people will fall for the love bomber because they say, I love you, early enough in the relationship that after years of waiting to hear those words in other relationships, a grandiose love bomber dropping that phrase early on, or an obsessive love bomber dropping that phrase early on, can mean that they get a free pass for their bad behavior pretty early in the relationship. The hardest part of a new relationship is seeing the good, the bad, and the indifferent. The good stuff is risky because it may play on this whole love bombing trope. The bad can be glossed away, and that's how we can keep the relationship going. And ultimately, as I have said many times, we are attracted to narcissistic people because they are attractive. They are attracted to us because, in our fashion, we are great supply. We're attractive. We may solve their problems. We may lack certain forms of power, for example, not have that much money, so it would be more difficult for us to leave and we're easier to control, or we may have certain forms of power, for example, social status, which will make us better supply. The getting in isn't the issue as much as the getting stuck. I've said this many times, because that's where issues like trauma bonding come into play. But to the degree we can also address the getting in by doing a sort of self-study on what core issues and wounds that we bring into a relationship, the more we can figure out which of these love bombing patterns can do a number on us. Dating advice rarely entails doing a deep dive on your schemas, narratives, wounds, traumas, and past relationships. But it makes a lot more sense than checklists and knowing what we want in a partner. You better know who you are first, because understanding some of this can help you understand why a controlling, emotionally harmful person was able to get such a toehold in your life, or that a person with Excel spreadsheets of their financial goals seemed hot. When we understand how these old demons come out to play for us, we may be able to open our eyes and those blind spots to the bad patterns as well. And we learn that the spreadsheet or the good morning texts are what they are, but that the gaslighting or the manipulation or the judgment or the betrayal are never okay. And there is no picnic on the beach, no 20-year plan, no good night text, no Instagram perfect relationship that can be an offset to being made to feel not enough in a relationship. Doing these deep dives with ourselves allows us to be honest with ourselves and ultimately to become more narcissist resistant. Good luck, and remember, love bombing ain't always a good time. Sometimes fairy tales look a hell of a lot different than you think. Thanks again.